Have you ever wondered what Amsterdam is all about? Don't just read about the culture that has accepted cannabis. Experience it firsthand with CS Travel's Sensible Amsterdam Tour with NORML. Travel to one of Europe's most beautiful cities this January for an educational and recreational visit to a city that regulates cannabis like alcohol. CS Travel has arranged an exclusive visit for reform-minded Americans that includes a private tour of some of Amsterdam's most renowned coffee shops, educational seminars with coffee shop proprietors, local law enforcement, members of the Cannabis Retailers Association, and NORML staff. Entertainment includes a special evening at the Boom Chicago Comedy Club, canal tours, visits to the city's many museums, including the world-famous Van Gogh Museum. Don't just wonder about Amsterdam, experience the beauty and freedom of this unique city firsthand with CS Travel and NORML's Sensible Amsterdam Tour. Pricing information is available online at coffeeshoptravel.com. That's coffeeshoptravel.com. Or call toll-free at 800-816-1846. That's 800-816-1846. Be a sensible American. Visit Amsterdam with CS Travel and NORML this January. Call 1-800-816-1846 right now to book your trip. More information is available at norml.org. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, normlaudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back here to the Audio Stash today on Wednesday, December 19th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us right here at NORML. Help us end marijuana prohibition in America. Make a positive choice in 2008 to help legalize marijuana. Head on up to norml.org, NORML.org, to make your donation or join NORML today. I have a great audio stash for you today. We'll have our regular Wednesday segment, Cannabis Science, with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. We've got a lot of interesting things to discuss with Mitch. Also today, we've got important daily news. That includes a news focus interview with NORML's senior policy analyst, Paul Armentano. We'll round out the day today with some pod-safe music as well. It's all here on your stash, your free stash, NORML's daily audio stash. Let's get to our daily news. Our news today from Washington, D.C. Latest marijuana smoke warnings could be mitigated by vaporization. The results of a recent Canadian study identifying the presence of various respiratory pollutants in marijuana smoke should be seen as an opportunity to better educate cannabis consumers about ways to mitigate the health risks associated with smoking, NORML senior policy analyst Paul Armentano said today. The study, which will appear in the forthcoming issue of the journal Chemical Research in Toxicology, reports that greater concentrations of certain respiratory irritants, such as ammonia, hydrogen cyanide or HCN, and various aromatic amines or nitrogen-related chemicals, are produced during the combustion of marijuana than during the smoking of tobacco. Investigators speculated that the presence of each of these chemicals was likely due to Health Canada's use of high-nitrate fertilizer when cultivating cannabis. By contrast, investigators also reported that mainstream marijuana smoke contained lower levels of selected polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons compared to tobacco. Exposure to certain polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons has been associated with increased cancer risk in animals and is suspected to play a role in the proliferation of various human cancers such as breast cancer and lung cancer. Tobacco-specific nitrosamines, arsenic, and lead were not present in marijuana smoke, investigators noted. Armentano said that many of the unwanted chemicals contained in marijuana smoke, including HCN and many polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, may be reduced or eliminated by engaging in vaporization rather than smoking.
By heating marijuana to a temperature where active cannabis vapors form, but below the point of combustion, consumers significantly reduce their intake of combustion toxins, including carbon monoxide.
That was NORML's senior policy analyst Paul Armentano. Most recently, investigators at San Francisco General Hospital reported in the journal Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics that the, quote, vaporization of marijuana does not result in exposure to combustion gases and is preferred by most subjects compared to marijuana cigarette, close quote. A previous clinical trial published in 2006 in the Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences reported that vaporization is a, quote, safe and effective, close quote, cannabinoid delivery system that, quote, avoids the respiratory disadvantages of smoking, close quote. Armentano also affirmed that cannabis smoking is not positively associated with cancers of the lung, mouth, or upper aerodigestive tract in the pharynx, larynx, or esophagus. In 2006, the results of the largest case-controlled study ever to investigate the respiratory effects of marijuana smoking reported that pot use was not associated with cancer, even among subjects who reported smoking more than 22,000 joints over their lifetime.
While smoking cannabis may pose some minor respiratory risk to the user, these health risks are far less than those posed by tobacco smoking and may be significantly mitigated by engaging in vaporization as an alternative to smoking. Unfortunately, cannabis prohibition greatly limits consumers' access to such devices and impedes technological advancements in this area, subjecting users to respiratory risks that they would otherwise avoid.
That was NORML's senior policy analyst Paul Armentano within the story there, and Paul joins us today to discuss this news item further. Paul, some of the controversy about this study surrounds the fact that the researchers used the medical marijuana grown by Health Canada at the bottom of a mine shaft for this study. They used high nitrate fertilizer on that mine shaft marijuana. Could that be affecting what comes out in the smoke?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on that subject, but the investigators who conducted this study and then wrote the review of it said that, in fact, it was very likely that the higher levels of ammonia and the higher levels of HCN and certain other unwanted chemicals that they found in greater prevalence in the marijuana was actually due to the interaction with the fertilizer that Health Canada, or Prairie Plant System specifically, had used to cultivate the pot that was sampled in this study.
And when we talk about vaporization, keeping some of those toxins out of the mist, is that because of the temperatures used?
Yes, it actually has everything to do with the temperature. Many of these unwanted chemicals that we are talking about, they are only contained when the substance has reached the point of combustion. When or if marijuana is not heated to the point of combustion, you would see the prevalence of these chemicals greatly reduced, and sometimes they'll be eliminated altogether.
Paul, we've discussed vaporizers and vaporization in depth here on the Audio Stash a number of times with yourself and other experts, but the technique still isn't all that common among regular consumers. Is that just because of consumer education, or because the vaporization devices themselves are kind of big, clunky, and expensive?
You know, I think it's a matter of both. I think there is limited consumer awareness in many parts of the country about vaporization. I think in some parts of the country where there is greater awareness, of the health benefits of vaporization, such as in California, vaporization is far more prevalent. However, I think you've also, hit something when you say vaporizers are bulky. Marijuana use in most parts of this country is still an illegal activity, and there's still great risk that goes along with it, and people who engage in the use of marijuana generally do it in a clandestine manner. It is much harder to do so with a vaporizer. Vaporizers are big. Some of them come with a bag. You need to store the vaporizer. So, once again, I really do believe that prohibition is limiting people's use of a technology that really would make their use of marijuana a much safer activity than it currently is when they engage in smoking. And certainly prohibition is playing a role in keeping the cost of vaporizers inordinately high. Certainly the best vaporizers on the market can run several hundreds of dollars. And, many consumers aren't willing to pay that price, particularly for a device that, when it comes to storing, is going to be an issue depending on where they live.
And certainly most consumers would be shy of having to plug an appliance into the wall to partake. And Paul, because tobacco and marijuana are very different substances, is it fair to compare the smoke from the two side by side like this?
I think it's fair. There are a lot of similar chemicals produced by the combustion of marijuana smoke that are also produced by the combustion of tobacco smoke. But I think it's important to talk about the differences in the quantity of inhaled smoke taken in by tobacco smokers versus marijuana smokers over a lifetime. And I think it's important to talk about the different alternatives to smoking that marijuana smokers can engage in compared to tobacco smokers. But I do think it is a fair comparison. Certainly many consumers of marijuana do have concerns about respiratory risks and health risks due to their smoking, and those concerns are warranted because we as a society are well aware of the health risks associated with tobacco smoking. So I actually do think it is a fair comparison, and I do think it is fair for marijuana consumers who are worried about their health to look into alternatives to smoking, such as vaporization. And frankly, as a consumer, I want to see these sort of studies done, and I want to be aware of what risks, if any, are posed by inhaling, the combustious gases from marijuana. And I think society at large wants to know that too.
And because there have been studies to show no definite causal link between even heavy marijuana smoking and cancer, should regular consumers be concerned about making a switch to vaporization, or should that concern only be for medical patients who may have other health risks?
Well, my answer to that would be there can be potential adverse health effects from the inhalation of smoke that don't simply just include the proliferation of certain cancers. Certainly we know that bronchitis is positively associated with heavy use of marijuana inhalation. Wheezing and cough is heavily positively associated with the use of heavy amounts of marijuana. So clearly, if somebody is a regular, going to be a long-term user of cannabis, such as a medical patient with a certain chronic or debilitating condition, I would encourage them to look into the use of vaporization as an alternative to smoking for a great number of health reasons, not just trying to protect themselves potentially from contracting various forms of cancer down the road, but simply for their overall health.
That was Paul Armentano, NORML's Senior Policy Analyst. More information about this story is available on NORML's website at norml.org.
Hi, I'm Rick Steves, and you're enjoying NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Please take a moment right now to support this organization by donating online.
Next up today, it's time for our Cannabis Science segment. Each Wednesday here on the Audio Stash, we get the chance to talk about the science of cannabis with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Mitch is professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany. He's author of Understanding Marijuana, A New Look at the Scientific Evidence, editor of the book Pot Politics, and he's got a new book coming out at the end of February called A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. You can also catch a monthly column by Mitch in High Times Magazine. We have links to it all right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. Mitch, welcome back to the show today.
Oh, great to be on.
Great to speak with you again this week, Mitch. Let's dive right in here. There's been a lot of news to go over. First, teen cannabis use is on the decline. We discussed that a bit last week. But the trends also show that teens and adults are using more and more prescription drugs without a prescription. That fact demonstrated by the Mitchell Report and baseball players using performance-enhancing drugs as well. Mitch, let me begin by asking you if you think this disturbing trend of Americans using pharmaceuticals outside of doctors is because any drug approved by the FDA, and that is in the pharmacopoeia for doctors, is viewed as safe, or at least safer, by the public.
There is a tacit assumption that if it's okay for one person, it's okay for everybody. And I feel like particularly with steroids, but also some of the other drugs that we're seeing abused a lot in teens, including the drugs prescribed for attention deficit problems like Adderall and Ritalin, really do have negative consequences that people have to, weigh and measure. What are the pros and what are the cons for each of these? And a physician can walk through that with people when they're really getting them prescribed. But when these start getting traded or pushed aside or available through underground markets, sometimes people are markedly less familiar with the negative consequences, and I feel like you really have to be educated about the use of these before you decide to put anything like this in your body.
Mitch, also when it comes to using these pharmaceuticals, it seems like they're very easy to obtain outside of the pharmacy. I mean, the underground economy for marijuana is something of a known quantity for me, but this prescription market on the streets, this is something I'm not too familiar with.
I am stunned, at least from the reports I get from students who suggest that at least availability over the Internet is almost absurdly easy. So you can fill out a small questionnaire via email, and a physician will approve various drugs for weight loss, attention deficit problems, and things like that, and they're often shipped from overseas. Now, I'm not a maniac when it comes to, everybody needs to have a prescription for every little thing, but I do feel like making sure consumers are informed about these drugs is a key issue, and doing so with a little paragraph on an Internet site is probably not the way to help folks make informed decisions about these drugs. In particular, the stimulants have really high addictive potential, Ritalin and Adderall in particular, and I just don't like the idea of folks getting their hands on those without a real understanding of their addictive potential and the negative consequences they can create.
How much has the shift in how pharmaceuticals are marketed to the public had an impact on all of this, do you think? I mean, we've seen failures with Vioxx and even Fen-Phen, but we're bombarded by regulated drug ads every day, mainly erection-giving drugs out there on the Internet and on TV. But how much has this saturation marketing of pharmaceuticals contributed to pharmaceuticals overall being abused, do you think?
I think that that's got to be a contributor, but we don't have data saying definitely guaranteed for sure. I also find that, at least among teen users, what they claim is, here's an opportunity for me to avoid law enforcement problems. So, yeah, I might prefer cannabis or drugs that have, markedly fewer negative consequences relative to the ones I'm getting. But if I've got these, I can probably talk my way out of it, tell a cop I have a prescription, or at least my parents won't be too upset because it's not an illicit drug per se. But in fact, these are illegal for folks who don't have the prescription. And so I feel like that distinction is becoming a finer and finer line, and something that people really need to think about. But again, I'd like to see this go through, the route of education, when people really understand that they don't necessarily need these drugs at all, and that they really are designed to treat medical symptoms. They aren't life enhancers in any way. They might be more willing to, let these drugs go by the wayside. And it's unfortunate, but when I think about, the drug with the fewest negative consequences remains illegal, I can't help but think I understand people making some of these decisions, in part because they want to sidestep having a criminal record.
Now, Mitch, all of the data I've seen shows that pharmaceuticals are being most heavily abused by two groups, college students and senior citizens. These are two groups who rarely have such choices in common. Senior citizens tend to get into an abuse pattern with drugs like OxyContin, and college students are abusing antidepressants. Are these kids looking for some performance enhancement to their academics?
My student Allison Luby has actually been doing some work on this topic with Ritalin in particular, and finds that there are sort of two subsets of folks who really want to achieve and folks who are literally just, grinding up Ritalin to snort it and party a lot. And it's curious because the impact on actual studying ability is not particularly positive. If you don't have an attention deficit problem, having a bunch of stimulants may make you be able to stay up later, but it really doesn't have the impact on memory or encoding of new information that would make it much of an edge as far as studying is concerned. It's unfortunate, too, because her data are suggesting that these are often folks who are binge drinking, who are engaging in a whole lot of other problematic behaviors, and who aren't engaging in some of the spaced practice things with their studying that we talked about last week. So if people would plan ahead and study a little bit every day instead of trying to cram it all into the weekend before the exam, suddenly the need for these drugs drops dramatically. And in addition, the enhancement that they're alleged to produce really isn't there. And I think that that's a disappointment that is a long time to learn. They keep thinking this is going to somehow magically make them smarter, and it's just not there, where the data really don't suggest that the enhancement is meaningful enough to make it worth the risk.
You mentioned the attitudes towards pharmaceuticals that allows abuse to be sort of rationalized. We've seen the baseball players using some of those statements this week, saying the drugs are not illicit and the like, but is all of this use of drugs in sports and abuse of pharmaceuticals, Mitch, is this all really new to American culture?
It's curious because particularly with the steroids as well, people think that you're going to take a steroid and wake up the next day and be the Incredible Hulk. It just doesn't work that way. Even with the most, powerful illicit steroids, you still have to exercise muscles to complete failure in order to get the benefits in the improvement and growth of the muscle size. So it's not an instant path in any way. And then the irony is the long-term effects of steroids are just so much worse than many, many of the illicit drugs. So we get literally testicular shrinkage, all these cardiovascular troubles, things like that, where over the years we're going to see, heightened rates of cancer and stuff like that. And it's a shame that in order to basically play a professional sport, you have to put your health at risk like this. That's clearly upsetting and obviously an individual choice, but one that makes me think maybe we ought to start paying more attention to, our local high school teams and having our enjoyment along the sports lines come from that, rather than putting so much pressure on individuals to have a professional life in sports and make them literally risk their health in order to do so.
I'm playing devil's advocate here. Isn't that what sports has always been about? I mean, the fans owning the players' blood and body.
It's a spooky thought, and it almost makes me think back to the Roman gladiators or something. It's to the point now where, all their behavior, both on and off the field, is under incredible scrutiny. And people seem to justify that by the salary they're paid. I just feel like this is a rough thing to put on any individual, and particularly these are folks who are often early in life. People in their 20s are, trying to make these informed decisions that are going to have impacts literally 30 and 40 years down the line. I really feel like it's an awful lot to put on anybody.
Now, also this week, Mitch, there was some news from Canada we featured as Daily News today, getting some prohibitionist spin out there. It was a study that compared tobacco smoke to marijuana smoke, and it used the government-grown marijuana for Health Canada. In this study, they used a machine that essentially smokes thousands of cigarettes, I think kind of the dark side of Dr. Seuss there. But this machine, this is a common and proven method for such tests.
Oh, yeah, it's intriguing how these machines that will actually draw on a joint or on a cigarette can mimic the human behavior well enough that I feel like these estimates of various chemicals in the smoke are relatively accurate, particularly given the generally large samples people take in order to do these gas sort of emissions type examinations. The curious thing about this study is, in fact, it's really not that much news. They're emphasizing that their respiratory irritants like ammonia and hydrogen cyanide in cannabis smoke at higher rates than there are in tobacco smoke. But again, I feel like, it's not that big a deal. It's not news. We don't see links between cannabis use and actual lung cancer, and that seems to be the thing that everybody is ranting and raving about with the presence of these irritants. Bob Malamud, who's been on this show before, points out that THC really is inhibiting in its impact on tumor growth in a curious and intriguing kind of way, so that may not be an issue. Now, as far as respiratory symptoms, from data that I've published and others, maybe these really are contributing some to the basically bronchitis, the coughing, the wheezing, the tightness in the chest, and that just gives me an opportunity to jump on my vaporizer soapbox yet again. In fact, when you look at data from literally years ago, we find that the vapor from the vaporizer really doesn't have anything but cannabinoids, and the presence of particularly hydrogen cyanide, but also carbon monoxide and other noxious respiratory irritants is really minimal. And so if folks are willing to fire up the vaporizer as an alternative to some of the other methods, these data are essentially irrelevant.
Now also, Mitch, people do physically smoke tobacco and marijuana in different ways. So should the two be compared like this?
The key issue is the total mass. So, lots and lots of folks smoke 40 cigarettes a day. Very few people smoke 40 joints a day. So the just general comparison across those lines is key. We do have a bad habit with smoking and joints in particular of this holding hits for a long time. And James Zachney's data from the University of Chicago have suggested that this really doesn't have as much of an impact as most cannabis users think. When you're holding smoke inside the lungs, of course, all these irritants have a much bigger opportunity to get deposited on lung tissue because the smoke is literally exposed so long, whereas the cannabinoids are actually absorbed often in less than a few seconds. So ironically, James Zachney has data where people held their hits for 10 seconds or held them for 0 seconds, literally just inhaled and blew it back out. And there really weren't any differences between the 10-second and the 0-second groups, except with the amount of stuff that's actually deposited. And Matthias, back from Tashkin's lab, has shown that this holding it in really does create a lot of gunk in the lung, whereas the advantage as far as intoxication is concerned is relatively minor. I realize this is going to get me a lot of angry emails, but if folks really want to try, just hold your breath for 20 seconds without any cannabis smoke in there, and you'll see some of the crazy subjective effects of just holding your breath are actually something you may have been attributing to holding your breath with cannabis in your lungs.
So in the end, this method of studying the smoke that was originated for cigarettes, it's okay to use with cannabis.
Well, I mean, it's ideal for that, but the smoking topography that they call it, the different size of the hits and the different rates of inhalation, these are modeled relatively well. The key issue is the amount. So to compare, 1 gram of marijuana to 1 gram of tobacco in this technique is revealing as far as 1 gram is concerned, but given the vast difference in the amount of tobacco smoked by tobacco smokers compared to the amount of cannabis used by cannabis users, it's kind of an overestimation, if you will, of the impact of cannabis, particularly when it comes to some of these irritants like ammonia and hydrogen cyanide.
Mitch, we started off discussing the pharmaceutical abuse issue by adults and teens. It seems sometimes the entire drug war is run on behalf of kids and teenagers from the rhetoric out there, but has overall substance use climbed within teens in America, or will there always just be a subset of teenagers who are going to use something?
It's interesting because the Monitoring the Future study has now been over 30 years of gathering data from at least high school seniors. And since the early 90s, we've been getting data from 10th graders and 8th graders, and we're finding not a ton of variation year to year. So I'm always happy to see that cigarette smoking is down, and I can't make a big deal out of cannabis dropping from 11.7% to 10.3% or something like that. But the bottom line is there's always been a percentage, particularly of the high school seniors, who use illicit drugs. And I feel like we can accept that and understand and try to educate folks as best we can. And as new data come out, I'm finding that the individual high school seniors who I'm meeting are responsive. When we talk about not necessarily abstaining, but keeping cannabis use to a minimum, or in fact not using until much later in life, people are more persuaded now by the true data, things on brain development, IQ decreases, and things along those lines, than they ever were about crazy notions of gateway theory or amotivational syndrome or stuff like that. And I think, honesty in education is going to be the way to make the kinds of changes we want. But this, we're going to have a drug-free America idea remains laughable to me when essentially, 40% of high school seniors have used some kind of drug that is either illicit or not prescribed to them.
And finally today here, Mitch, since we were discussing the whole Major League Baseball thing, let me ask, are you a baseball fan?
Well, I grew up in St. Louis, so you can imagine, basically, if you were going to live there, you had to be a baseball fan. And I actually used to sell ice cream right outside of Busch Stadium, so this was a big deal to me.
So all of this won't deter you from continuing to be a baseball fan?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to take the records as seriously as I used to, so I feel like some of the guys from back in the day who I always admired, I may actually admire more because they set some of their records without some of the same chemical enhancements.
Do you really think baseball was less drug-influenced, a less drug-influenced game in the past?
Oh, I'm afraid the availability of growth hormone in particular was dramatically different back then, and so I do take some of those achievements a little more seriously.
Righto. Well, Mitch, it's always great to speak with you. Many thanks for joining us today and every Wednesday right here on the Audio Stash.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you again, Mitch. Dr. Mitch Earlywine is professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany. He is author of Understanding Marijuana, A New Look at the Scientific Evidence, editor of the book Pot Politics. He's got a monthly column in High Times magazine, and his newest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana, will hit store shelves at the end of February in 2008. We have links to all of Mitch's books right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. Now it's time for a nice Wednesday music mix of pod-safe music. Care of the good folks at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance and podshow.com. Links to all of the artists we play right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com.
It's dreamy weather we're on. You waved your crooked wand along an icy pond with a frozen moon, a murder of silhouette crows I saw, and the tears on my face, and the skates on the pond, they spell Alice. I disappear in your name, but you must wait for me somewhere across the sea. There's the wreck of a ship. Your hair is like meadow grass on the tide, and the raindrops on my window, and the ice in my drink. Baby, all I can think of is Alice. Arithmetic, arithmetic. Turn the hands back on the clock. How does the ocean rock the boat? How did the razor find my throat? The only strings that hold me here are tangled up around the pier. And so a secret kiss brings madness with the bliss. And I will think of this when I'm dead in my grave. Set me adrift and I'm lost over there, and I must be insane to go skating on your name, and by tracing it twice And so a secret kiss brings madness with bliss. And I will think of this when I'm dead in my grave. Set me adrift and I'm lost over there, and I must be insane to go skating on your name, and by tracing it twice I fell through the ice of Alice. There's only
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
I'm holding the post, and I'm running for freedom. No political road, no, just a hunch of a feeling. Too old is the war, too young our redemption. Too sorry the state of the world, and it's too sorry to mention. Where there were those who would stand up and count themselves in for the whole. Now only rivers of money are washed by the hands that fight to own more. I'm nobody's choice, and I'm nobody's monkey, but I have a voice, and I know you don't want me. I'll say what I will, and I'll sing with conviction. There's a flag on the hill, peace wins the election. Where there were those that would stand up and count themselves in for the whole. Now only rivers of money are washed by the hands that fight to own more. I won't sit on the fence, I won't call for no planning. This world should be friends and stand up for the planet. I won't tire of the toil, I won't swing on the glory. Between humans and soil, there's a beautiful story. Where there were those that would stand up and count themselves in for the whole. Now only rivers of money are washed by the hands that fight to own more. Where there were those that would stand up and count themselves in for the whole. Now only rivers of money are washed by the hands that fight to own more. Oh, we're in for the long haul. Pull up a chair. We're in for the long haul. We all gotta pull. We're in for the long haul. Peace wins the election.
You're listening to Pod Safe Music on NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
guard that joint, my friend. Pass it over to me. Don't bogart that joint, my friend. Pass it over to me. Roll another one, just like the other one. This is seems to be about to quit, and I need another hit. Don't bogart that joint, my friend. Pass it all around. Don't bogart that joint, my friend. Just pass it on down. Roll another one, just like the other one. This one seems to be about spent, and I don't have another cent. Don't bogart that joint, my friend. Just pass it on down. Don't bogart that joint, my friend. Just pass it around. Don't bogart that joint. Just pass it around. Don't bogart that joint now. Just pass it on down.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
A nice Wednesday mix of pod-safe music here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash, care of the good folks at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance and podshow.com. Links to all of the artists we play here on the program on our website at normalaudiostash.com. Listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. Podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redapphid.com.